Hello everybody, thank you for watching this video. Hope you enjoy it, and please like and subscribe and do all the YouTubey things. Give me a comment if you wish. Tell me what you think about it. This video here is going to be about my experience in Arazoa. What I like about it, what I dislike about it, if I recommend it or who I recommend it for, and if you're new to the server or you're thinking about joining, some tips that I think will make your experience better. This is based on the last 6 months of me playing on this server almost exclusively. It's an adaptive realism server. The rules are based on realism gameplay for the most part. There are some adaptations to help create a more enjoyable experience for players. You have to incorporate some PvP, aspects to it as well. So it's as realism as it gets, I think, reasonably so. The things that I like about the server, I guess I'll start off with the staff. I think for the most part, especially the host and the administrators and the upper staff are really well-meaning, fair people. I think they're in the rules and the way that they judge the tickets and things like that seem to be fair for the most part. They've really created an amazing environment that I've enjoyed playing on. You can tell that they put a lot of time into it. They put a lot of thought into it. They are regularly making adjustments and improvements to it, and it really shows. So I can tell they're hardworking because I think a lot of them have full-time jobs. I don't know any of them personally or anything like that. I only know based on my experience of interacting with them on the server since I've been here. But I think they have full-time jobs, at least a lot of them do, and they also do this server, which I think probably is like a full-time job in and of itself. So it's pretty amazing what they've done. The dinosaurs in the game are the best balance I've seen on any server by far. They make frequent adjustments and improvements on the dinosaurs as well. You can tell they're regularly working on balancing and improving things, and I can see those results monthly, if not weekly, on the server. So I really appreciate that. The community overall is very positive. There's an amazing etiquette, mutual respect, and sportsmanship among most of the players in the community, and I really think that that's cool. It's more than I've seen on any other server, so I enjoy that part of it as well. And they have some awesome, unique, and fun features like events and giveaways and flash sales and stuff that just add to the whole enjoyment of the experience here on Arazoa. And there's a couple of unique things about Arazoa that really set it apart from other servers that I noticed, and it's two of the primary reasons I actually wanted to come join the server to check it out. And that is, the first thing is that they have a third-party rule. The server that I played on, another server that I do play on that I used to play on exclusively called Crimson, they don't allow any kind of third partying. So if there's two players in a fight, you're not allowed to engage in that at all for whatever reason. So it kind of results in a lot of chaotic fights going on in a certain area, and it's not doesn't totally lend itself to realism. It doesn't create a real realistic experience when you see something like that. So the third party actually does, because it, in the wild, if if a cougar's taken down an elk or something like that, and a wolf pack happens by there, they're probably going to third party that elk and try to eat it if they're hungry. So it's in the same way I'm sure dinosaurs behave that way. So it does lend to a realistic experience, and it also makes hunting a little more risky and fights a little more risky. You've got to give it some more thought before you would just go and attack something, because you got to think about whether or not you might get third partied. And so I kind of think that's cool. It makes it more exciting, and I think it makes it more of a realistic experience. The second thing is that they have these large herd limits on Arazoa. So like you can have, I think, up to 10 or 12 triceratops in a herd, and they have all kinds of these massive herds. Like you'll just see these massive herds walking around Arazoa from time to, or Gondua from time to time on this server, which I think is pretty cool, and it's makes it, for me, I think, a little bit more of a realistic experience. It seems like you really are a dinosaur kind of cruising through the late Cretaceous period or something like that. So those are some of the reasons I enjoy playing on Arazoa. And now for some of the things I dislike about Arazoa. Some of the things I dislike, I'll start with the rules. The rules are kind of a double-edged sword, because the rules on one hand actually make it a great experience, but They're also a little more complicated, relatively speaking, than other servers' rules. And so it creates a pretty big learning curve coming from a server like Crimson or some of these other servers that have basic general rules that are simple and easy to understand. Like on Crimson, for example, there's a body down rule, which is, body drops and all the fighting stops. And or like the third party rule in Crimson, if there's two people in a fight, you don't engage. It's simple and easy. And Arazoa does have some simple basic rules like that too, but they've also got some more detailed rules that can kind of get pretty complicated and involved. And unless you really know them, it creates a situation where it's kind of easy to accidentally break rules. Even when you think you're playing by the rules, you can get some accidental rule breaks, especially when you're new. When I was new, this happened to me, and it happens to everybody when they're new in the server. It's just the way the server is, the nature of the server, and the nature of the complicated rules that they have. Um, so, for example, one of the differences, like I talked about, is the third party rule. So the third party rule can get kind of complicated because what happens is you're only allowed to third party on hunts, but you're not allowed to third party in territory disputes. So if you come across a couple of dinosaurs in a fight, you don't know if that's not always know if that's a territory or a hunt. So if you jump in third party and it turns out that it was a territory dispute, well, you're going to get a strike. So basically, you want to make sure you see the whole fight, start to finish before you decide if you're going to engage, so that you know for sure whether or not, it's a terry or a hunt. But sometimes you do know it's a hunt, but you don't realize that there's already a third party, especially with the addition of this little bird, the Ramkus bird that's super tiny. It could be latched onto one of the dinosaurs in the fight that you don't see, and maybe you're starving on your T-Rex or whatever, and you go and try to third party and get a body down so you can eat and have the kill for yourself, but then you find out there was a Ramkus attached to one of the dinosaurs, and that was the third party, and now you're the fourth party, and that can lead to you getting a strike, obviously. So another thing would be sometimes you might see a dinosaur hiding in a bush, for example, like a baby Giga hiding in a bush. And you think, oh man, I'm hungry, I'm going to eat that, Giga. And you feel like you kind of see some stuff going on around you, some fighting in that, but you don't know. This Giga appears to be by itself, so you go and eat it. And then you find out later that it had parents that were actually in a fight nearby that was already had a third party involved, right? So now you're the fourth party and you get a strike for that. So that's a couple of ways, just a couple of examples of how you could accidentally get a strike. Now, this would go to a ticket, the staff would review it, and if you explain that, they may give you a warning. It's totally up to their discretion what they're going to do. They're well within their right to give you a strike, and they may very well do that. But they could maybe give you a warning and say, hey, be careful next time or whatever. And they're pretty fair for the most part, but I think it really just boils down on what staff member you get. I think there's some that are just quick to give strikes, and maybe if you did something that they don't like, or they don't like you or something like that, they could possibly give you a strike for that, And again, it's nothing wrong with that because it is against the rule. You did break a rule, so they could give you a strike, But again, to me, it's a way to accidentally get a strike, even when you think you're playing fairly. So you gotta be very, very careful about your engagements in Arazoa. So I say that because there are some people that don't want to have to put up with that, and maybe it's not the right server for you if that's not something that you're willing to do or think would be a fun thing to do. If that's going to detract from your enjoyment, then maybe you don't play on Arazoa, because it can happen. Then there's like territory contests and body down contests. If you're a carnivore and you see another carnivore with a body down, you can challenge for the body. If this is kind of where the rules get a bit complicated, because you can also challenge for the territory, but the two kind of go together if the dinosaur that you're on and the group that you're in meets the territory criteria. Well, then now if you challenge for that body, you're also by default challenging for the territory. So if you're a a sub-apex, for example, the criteria for sub-apex is if you have two in your group, you meet the criteria to challenge for territory. So if you're two, uh, um, let's say you're two DASPs, and you go into Grand Plains and you're hungry and you see another DASP with a body down, you can challenge that DASP, and then he can either accept the fight or forfeit the body. And either way, that's going to default to a territory challenge also, so that other DASP that you just territoried off of the body is going to have to leave the POI, and you now have to stay in that POI. And there's timers for how long you have to stay there and how long you have to stay away, whether you won or you lost. So that sometimes gets lost in the shuffle because the DASP that was on the body may not realize that the two DASPs also qualify for the territory, and so that DASP could just leave the body but stay in the area, and then the other two DASPs now go and attempt to kill that DASP because they have the right to kill that DASP that left if he didn't leave the POI. But maybe that DASP didn't understand that part of the rule, or see that, or forgot about it, or whatever, and then he gets killed or he gets attacked, and then he fights back. Well, now he's rule breaking because he's fighting back, and that's not allowed. You can't fight back. If you forfeited off of a body and you forfeited out of the territory, you have to leave the territory. You can't fight back. So that's another way you could accidentally, just another example of how you could accidentally break a rule. And just to give you an idea of kind of a complication in the rule set on Arazoa. There's also a lot of gray areas in the rules, and it comes down to the moderator's interpretation of that rule. If you get reported or you have to get involved in a ticket where you might get a strike, maybe you're doing something that you read the rule and you feel like you're doing something that is okay, but a staff member decides it's not okay. They could give you a strike for that. So an example of that would be the impact crater pond, for example. There's a rule that says sub-apex and apex semi-aquatic dinosaurs are not allowed, and the rule states are not allowed to inhabit the pond. So if you're on a suco and you are pursuing a stego in a hunt, and the stego goes into that water in the pond, well, you're not allowed to inhabit that. So maybe you interpret that to mean, as I did when I first started, to mean that you're not allowed to live in there or not allowed to dwell for an extended period of time in there. But you might think that it's okay to swim across it, or that it's okay to hunt, pursue a hunted creature into it, because that's not inhabiting the pond if you're doing those two things. But really what they mean is you're not allowed to enter that pond ever if you're a semi-aquatic, sub-apex, or apex. So it comes down to an interpretation of that rule. Now, you can get clarification of that and they'll explain it to you, which I did, but some people have to get a strike first because they break the rule and then they get the thing explained to them. And to me, it's one of the things I don't like, because I wish that was defined a little more clearly. I'll go ahead and put a suggestion in about that definition or about that rule to maybe make it more clear. But I think people have made suggestions about that before, and it really does boil down to what they mean by it, and how the rule is written could be easily interpreted differently. So that's an example of something that where you may feel like you're following the rules, but you're not. Another one is this: there's a thing called metagaming, and you may be doing something that a moderator interprets as metagaming, and an example of that, and maybe you don't feel like you're metagaming at all. So metagaming is basically using knowledge or information or tactics that involve stuff that's beyond the scope of what your particular dinosaur character would know at the time. So an example of metagaming would be you get on a Thalassodromeus and you fly around to scout an area out, and you see a bunch of targets down there. Okay, there's my target. I see that lone Iggy all by himself over there, and I know I have a T-Rex parked over in this place, so I'm going to now log off my Thalassodromeus, get on the T-Rex, and go and kill that Iggy. Well, that's metagaming because, again, you're using knowledge that dinosaur wouldn't otherwise have had to go and attack another dinosaur. So, but what happened to me was I got a strike for quote unquote metagaming when I wasn't metagaming at all. But for some reason, I kind of think there's some other. I think there's a particular moderator that doesn't like me and was kind of like using this to give me a strike basically. But they said that I was metagaming for. I was on a Barsboldia and I was at the river at Grand Plains and I got attacked by a Spinosaurus, and so I ran away. I ran opposite direction of the shoreline. Most of the time, every other Spinosaurus that's ever attacked me, for example, has gone back to the shoreline, to the water, as soon as I get, halfway inland. When they're kind of out of line of sight of the river, they turn around and go back because they're Spinosaurus. And that's realism, right? Our Spinosaurus would not travel miles and miles and miles away from their river to hunt something that they may not even kill. So this particular player was being super unrealistic, in my opinion, and they chased me all the way across Grand Plains. And being that I was going away from the shoreline, what if you draw a straight line from the opposite direction of the river, away from the river in Grand Plains, you hit Impact Crater. That was the direction I was traveling in. It was kind of the only logical direction to travel in my opinion, and that's what I did. I was going as far away from that river as I could. I ended up in Impact Crater. I got down into Impact Crater and I was out of stamina, and I'm looking around like, where do I go now? I'm trying to get away from this thing, and I see the pond, and I remember, oh yeah, they're not allowed to go in that pond. And I've seen plenty of other herbivore players go into that pond to seek refuge from a semi-aquatic sub-apex or apex, and moderators have been there and put in local chat to the semi-aquatic, stay out of the pond, and they've saved the life of an iggy or another herbivore that happened to go into the pond for refuge. So I thought it was perfectly okay for me to do that, and I did it, and the Spinosaurus followed me in there and continued to fight, and I ended up killing it, luckily. And it was fighting from within the pond, so it was clearly breaking a written rule. But I ended up getting a strike for what they called metagaming. And they said it was metagaming to do that because I was using that knowledge of a rule to try to, I guess, get that player to rule break or to save the life of my dinosaur. But again, I don't think that's metagaming. I think that's just, fleeing from battle, and you're just looking for opportunities to escape. And that's an opportunity to escape. So in wild, if a Barsboldia found an area that it knew the Spino couldn't fit into or didn't like or whatever, it probably would go into that area to save its life. So that's technically the equivalent of what I was doing. But they thought it was metagaming, and they gave me a strike for it, and I was able to appeal it, and they were nice enough to evaluate it and understand my point of view and give me a warning instead. I just think it's kind of silly that I got a strike for it in the first place. I think it's kind of a reach for them to say that I'm metagaming by doing something like that. So that's another example of a rule that it's a metagaming rule that's kind of gray, and it comes down to the interpretation of the moderator. And so it falls into this category of some things that I don't like about the server. It's a gray area metagaming kind of rule that comes down to the interpretation of a moderator. And even if to me, it should come down to the intent of a player. And you shouldn't be giving people strikes for some technicality or the appearance of something when they, you can look at it and see that they had a totally legitimate reason for why they were doing what they were doing. It's clearly not metagaming. I think they should give you the benefit of the doubt in those cases, and so that's one of the things I dislike about it. I think they could clarify that metagaming stuff a little bit better, and I think they could be more consistent in their punishments and the way they apply the punishments to different people and the way that they interpret the rules. Because like I said, I've seen other players do that more times than I can count, go into that pond to escape predators, and I've even seen other moderators defending those players that were doing that. And I know other players that have done it that have not gotten a strike. In fact, I had a ticket involving a different moderator where I did the same thing on a stego, running away from Sucos, and they didn't say anything about me metagaming. They did. They told me they took care of it in terms of what the Suco players, so I assume they got strikes for it. I don't know, maybe they got warnings. They were definitely talked to about it, but it was clear in the ticket that they were the ones that rule break and I wasn't. Yet when I do it on my bars, for some reason it's metagaming. And again, it just boils down to having a different moderator in that case. So, and the way they interpreted it. So I think they could be a little bit more consistent. And that brings me to another thing that I don't like about the server is the fact that the punishment system is not public. So whatever happens to a player that breaks a rule, there's no public record of that. So you don't know if the person that rule broke against you, maybe, right? Like that Spinosaurus player, for example, that went into the pond, that broke a clear rule. I don't know if they got a strike. I have no idea what happened to them. They could have gotten a warning. They could have maybe just gotten talked to. Who knows? Maybe nothing happened to them. But I think if they were public about it and transparent about their punishments and what they're doing for all of the players, it would help in a lot of ways, because it would help. For one thing, it would help players review what happened and all the strikes that took place the day before. I would review that every day before I played to see what was happening, what's going on, why people were getting strikes, and then that way it would give me some information on what not to do myself. Maybe somebody did something that's a rule break that you didn't realize was a rule break, and it would help people understand the rules and play by the rules better, I think. It would also maybe embarrass some players too, because it could show certain players getting strikes all the time or getting warnings all the time, and maybe now you don't want to group up with that player, or that player might start being a little more careful because they're going to be embarrassed by having their name all the time showing up in the strike list, for example. So that's one thing that I dislike about the server, that they don't have the punishments public. I think it would help to have that transparent, just like they do in real life. You have an arrest record, it's public. You can see if somebody's, gotten a ticket for jaywalking, or if they've been arrested for bank robbery. You can tell kind of what kind of person that is. Sometimes those gray areas basically can lead to rules that are easy to break by mistake, and you might make an honest mistake and break a rule and not really intend to. And I think that it would be better if they base the rules more on intent and not so much on appearance. And then I guess that kind of brings me to my last point, and that is moderators who may decide for some reason that they don't like you. They're going to apply those rules much more harshly to you than they do other people. They're going to be going out of their way to try to see if you're rule breaking. They might be stretching, what you're doing into a rule break when really it probably wasn't. Just like I believe in my case with the bars going into the pond, that player happened to reach out to a moderator that has given me many strikes in the past that I think were really, really silly strikes. And I think that moderator had an influence in that was a senior moderator, and I think that they had an influence in the other moderator giving me a strike for that. Although I may be wrong, but it seems to be a pattern going on there with that particular moderator. But I've also had some situations where I believe that moderator was using information and their power as a moderator to gain advantages in the game too. There was a time when I was on my T-Rex and I was hunting some aloes, and I ended up killing one of them, and then they left, and they about 5 minutes later showed back up, all adults. So the one that I killed was even an adult. So they used, they grew their dinosaur back up, and they teleported the other dinosaur back, and they challenged for the body. And that I asked a question about that in Q&A for staff, and I was confirmed that that's definitely a rule break. And I looked at the replay, and it turned out it was all moderators that were doing that. And it was one of the moderators that I believe was targeting me in the past. And they've said no, that they weren't targeting me, that it's just because I frequent Grand Plains, which is kind of a popular area, and I did have a lot of strikes at the time. Some were totally legitimate, some I think were kind of ticky-tack, like I say, just some of these technicalities and stuff like that. But since that moderator, looks at that area, and I frequent that area, it just seems like they're targeting me. But, then after that, you see this case where they did this with the aloes. I don't think it's a coincidence that moderator was involved in that. I think that they saw my name tag. They turn name tags on in the game when they're playing. They see that player that they don't like, and they go after them. I think that happens. Thankfully, I don't think it happens all the time. I don't think it happens by most of the moderators. I think, like I said at the very beginning, I think most of them, there's probably only one or two that do this kind of thing. But you know how they say, a bad apple spoils the bunch. So that you might experience that in Arazoa. It's just certainly something that I've experienced. Whether it's a coincidence or not, I guess you can be the judge of that. But there's been a number of times when I've been involved in situations where it really sure seemed like the moderator that was involved on the other end of the engagement, was using knowledge that most players would not have at the time, and maybe using things that they can do in the game that other players can't do, like going their dinosaur to full, or using a teleport feature, or coming back and to target a player that has a body down when you're clearly not allowed to do that. So that's one of the other things I don't like. But again, overall, it's a minor part of all the other stuff that I went over and the positives that I went over. So now that I've given you my positive, and I've given you all my things that I like about it and the things that I dislike about it, do I recommend it? Well, I do recommend it. So that brings me to my tips. Things that I learned that I wish I would have known. One of the main things, and I think it's probably one of the reasons why I'm having an issue with a moderator, is probably because I used to type and chat all the time. When I first came to this server, I was very much coming from a culture from other servers where chatting and having engagements in chat was a common thing, and it's like some banter that goes back and forth, and somebody says something to you and you have a witty comeback, and there's a little bit of laughter and people are getting a little bit of enjoyment out of it, and that kind of thing goes on as part of the game in many servers. But in Arazoa, it's best to stay away from all that because it doesn't lend to a realistic experience. It does ruin the realism experience for a lot of players. They don't want to see somebody arguing in chat like that. And I go back and I look at a lot of the stuff that I was chatting about, and it's dumb and immature, and I wish I wouldn't have done it. And I think that maybe when I first started, maybe I said some things in chat that were toxic and that a particular moderator did not like or took offense to, and so that made them, maybe give me a little bit harsher punishments than they would normally. And so I can understand that, we're all only human. And so my tip is stay out of chat unless it's absolutely necessary. Don't engage in arguments. Don't try to tell people what the rules are. Don't do anything like that unless it's absolutely necessary and affects your gameplay directly. I would stay out of chat totally. It just, I think, is one of the things that led me into some issues that I have now that I probably wouldn't have. So if I had to do all over again, I wouldn't be chatting in the local chat unless it was absolutely necessary. The other tip I have is to stick to realism. Even if you are a PvPer, like I'm kind of a PvPer at heart, it's best to stick to realism. Try to find a dinosaur that you like, that you enjoy, and play that dinosaur as if you are really that dinosaur. And the PvP part of it will come just organically. It'll come to you. You don't have to go out of your way to look for fights and to look for the PvP situations. I used to think that you did, but you really don't. I've been focusing on realism in the past few months now that I've been on the server, and I've had a real fun time doing that. And the PvP experience is still there, if not even more so now. But if you focus on PvP and you focus on winning the fight or winning the hunt and all that, you can lose sight of the rules and stuff like that, like the third-party rules and the engagement rules and things, and it can lead to strikes and rule breaks that otherwise, if you're just focusing on realism, probably would be you'd probably be fine if I was focusing, or if you're focusing on realism rather than on PvP. So based on that, I would also say when you first start and you're learning the rules and stuff like that, you can read the rules once and you're not gonna totally. I mean, there's a small percentage of the population that maybe has a photographic memory that can read them one time and get them all. But I certainly am not like that, and I don't think most people are like that. So I would say review the rules more than once before you start playing. Pick a dinosaur that's a passive creature, herbivore that's not aggressive, like maybe a Psittacosaurus or something like that, the taco as everybody calls it, or some type of herbivore that's passive, because you can get in the game, start getting used to the rules, and review the rules more than once, and really familiarize yourself with the rules and with the server. get yourself comfortable, and then kind of maybe move up into a carnivore where you're going to be hunting stuff. That would really help, I think. That would have helped me certainly when I first started. So that's everything I have for this video, pretty much. If you have any response or comments or suggestions you think would that you disagree with me, maybe leave it in the comment. Or if you think there's something I should have added or said that I didn't, leave it in the comment. Have you experienced something like I have in Arazoa? Has your experience been similar or different? Let me know. Put a comment in, and I respond to all my comments. So this is kind of one of the first videos I've ever done commentary like this on. We'll see how it goes. Obviously, I don't have a huge YouTube channel, but it is what it is, and I figured this would be a good outlet for me to share my experience. I know there's a few players that I've talked to that play other servers that are thinking about Arazoa that haven't come here yet because they've heard that the rules are a bit complicated. Maybe this helps you make your decision. And if you're new here and you're playing here and you have other questions or you need help, I'm totally willing to help anybody out. You can always DM me in Discord, leave me a comment here, whatever, and I'd be happy to offer my advice or help if I can. Yeah, thanks for watching. Hopefully you got something out of it. Again, do all the YouTube stuff, like, subscribe if you enjoyed it, and I'll try to make some more if it looks like this video gets good reception. Thanks again for joining, for watching. Appreciate you. Bye.